Guys, we're going to talk about personal identity in Western philosophy today. So the first thing I want you to do is I want you to think about baby you. Okay, little baby you. All right, think about baby you versus you now. How different are you? Could you even recognize baby you as yourself? Would other people recognize baby you as you? Think about toddler you. Little toddler philosopher. Toddler you differs from baby you. In fact, this little change between newborn you and 2 to 3 year old you is the most you'll change your whole life. Then toddler you to high school you, it's very different. Now think of current you. Think about everything that's different about you from high school you. Even if you're really close, even if you just graduated high school, there's a lot that's changed about you from high school you to current you. Think about future you. Think about how much future you will differ from current you. Future you will differ from high school you, and so forth. Think about dying you. How is dying you different from current you? And depending on your worldview, dead you is going to be really different from dying you, from future you, from current you. It still might be you. And so the question is, look, there's a lot of change going on here. And yet somehow, baby you, toddler you, high school you, current you, future you, dying you, and then dead you might all be the same person, the same object, right? So the question that Western philosophy asks is how someone, we'll call them S, is the same person at time 1 as at time t, or time 2, excuse me. So the question is, what makes you unique, individuated, and allows you to persist through time? So what is not meant here is you might think like, oh, my personal identity is a list of characteristics and facts about yourself. So like maybe you're Christian, maybe you've transitioned, maybe your values have changed substantially from when you were a child to now. These are all part of your identity, so to speak, but it's not really what we're concerned with in this question of personal identity. What we're concerned with is the thing that everyone has that individuates them, so separates them from other people, so uniquely yours, and persists through time. Another way to think about it is, if you went to another universe, or you stepped into a parallel timeline, you would be the same you are now. At least we have that in intuition. And so what is the thing that makes that possible? That's what we're concerned with. Another little caveat here is not every culture, not every view holds that there is such a thing. So for instance, Buddhism denies the self, so there's not really a question of what persists through time. There's no self, so there's no thing to which we can point to that does this. Bundle theorists in Western philosophy also deny the self, and so they're going to have a completely different sort of metaphysical commitment that talks about persistence through time, if there is persistence, because there's no personal identity. But we're going to assume there is such a thing. And we're going to ask this question, how someone S is the same person at time 1 as at time 2. So what makes you you and allows you to persist through time? And we're going to talk about particularly John Locke. Now, if you're familiar with John Locke, it's probably because you do political science or something like that, so you think about political theory, and Locke wrote a couple of colonial constitutions and a couple of books, and wrote some ways to justify slavery and like taking people's land, as well as stuff about liberty and autonomy and property rights. You also might know him from history for these reasons. So he's well known, he's a really well-known philosopher, and he's actually an interlocutor of Descartes, and he actually rejects Descartes' view. So we've talked about Descartes. So Locke is what we call a materialist, and a materialist is somebody who, contra the rationalist, so the rationalist thinks that it's the type of creature we are that allows us to reason to things. Materialists say, okay, no, we're material things, and it's materially grounded experiences that allow us to know things. So, both cases we have reason. It's just, what does knowledge bottom out in? It's different. One hand, it's clear and distinct ideas, and then the materialist says, no, it's empirically supported inputs. So that's what Locke is. So we have a couple options for what personal identity can be: soul, body, something else. And we'll just call this consciousness for now. Okay. And you can see this in the excerpt. So the excerpt starts with soul and it ends with Locke listing out soul, body, consciousness as options and saying, like, either way, what you're going to end up with is his view, right? So he says it's not soul. He starts the excerpt with this. And so the worry here is that there's not really anything that individuates the soul, right? I could have the same soul as somebody who died in Pompeii when Mount Vesuvius erupted. There's nothing preventing that. So he says, like, look, if you think it's soul, then there has to be something about the soul that can be individuated, but we don't think, or we don't have any reason to think that souls aren't individuated, are individuated or can't be reused or something like that. You have to do a lot more work than just say, oh, it's the soul. And he says, it can't be body. So you might think because he's a materialist, he's going to say body. In the background of this is this worry that if you're eaten, like if you die and you're eaten by a cannibal, you won't be raptured. That's some of the driving force behind why Locke is talking about this. So he's going to deny us the body. And he's going to make a distinction between, a man and a person. So we might just say human here. Kind of universalize it a little bit. So body makes the same human. Right? You have the same object. But it does not make the same person. Okay, this is going to be something else. The reason he says this is like, look, if you just pluck a body and you put it somewhere else, there's no real evidence that you have the same person. And this is where his cobbler and prince example is pretty compelling. He argues, right? He's doing this as a little intuition pump, a little thought experiment. If you take the consciousness, okay, so we're going to say consciousness C, that's the cobbler, all right, and put it into the body of the prince, so body P, and you take the consciousness of the prince and you put it into the body of the cobbler, who's who? All right, so he says, look, if the cobbler has done something wrong, would you punish the body of the cobbler or the body of the prince? Or if you needed to go seek insight into the management of the country, would you go to the body of the cobbler? Would you go to the body of the prince? And he says, look, personhood is in consciousness. Where consciousness, for him, so he says every animal has reason, or every human has rationality, and then this rationality is a consciousness. So this is an awareness of oneself in a particular way. So this is having an awareness of one's memory. It's connected in the right way across time, and that's what personhood consists in. So if you remember yourself in high school, right, that's what connects current you to high school you. And future you is going to remember parts of yourself from now to high school you, and so forth. And so that's how you're going to be the same person. So he says it's consciousness, and he gives his cobbler and prince example, right? So he says, look, if you're going to punish somebody for the crime, it should be the person who committed the crime, i.e. the consciousness of the cobbler. If you're going to go seek advice on how to lead the country, it'd be the consciousness of the prince who you'd go to. And he says our intuitions tell us this, right? So you wouldn't go to the body of the cobbler to get a shoe made. You'd go to the body of the prince because that's where the cobbler's consciousness is. So he says, look, it might be the same man, but it's not going to be the same person. So if you put the consciousness of the cobbler into the body of the prince, then you have the cobbler. You put the consciousness of the prince into the body of the cobbler, then you have the prince. What does this mean? Well, it means that if you lose your memory, you're not the same person, at least according to Locke. So, say you rob a bank, all right, a little money bag here, the police are chasing you, you jump off a really tall building to get away, and you go splat. You wake up in the hospital with all of your memories. Okay, this is hospital you. All of your memories from this point backwards don't exist. It's gone. There's no continuity there, no awareness of your consciousness through time. And so Locke says this isn't the same you. So this version of you back here, pre-memory loss, pre-you waking up in the hospital, is not the same you. There's some obvious objections here that we might raise. So here's the first one, right? What if you lack a memory of something that is connected to you? So for instance, you don't remember you as a baby. So is that the same you? Now, Locke has a pretty particular view of what it means to be a person. So you have to have reason, consciousness, and so forth. So if you lack that, you're not a person. And we might think about the ethical implications of that, but essentially, look, what Locke is going to say to this is like, you're not a person, so of course it's not the same you. Another one is called the soldier objection. So remember, we're talking about identity across time. So we can imagine a soldier, the age of 5. He steals from a fruit tree at school, and he's flogged by the headmaster. Okay, and then we can imagine the same soldier at 20. Okay, when he storms the enemy's position and he takes their standard. And then we can think of him at 70. All right, he's an old man, he's retired. And the question is, okay, so 20-year-old soldier remembers 5-year-old soldier. So 20-year-old soldier remembers being whipped as a boy at 5. And 70-year-old soldier remembers himself at 20 getting the standard from his enemy. But 70-year-old soldier does not remember getting whipped at school as a 5-year-old. So if we think about, if we do a little math here, it's called transitivity. If you guys hear that noise in the background, that's just my dog drinking. I apologize. So time 1, he's remembers time 2, so he's the same at time 1 as he is at time 2. So this is T1, this is T2, this is T3. Okay, T2 equals T3. So what should we have here? Okay, following the laws of transitivity, it should be the case that T3 equals T1, right? Right, so if A equals B equals C, then C equals A. That's the basic logic that's going on here, but it's the case under Locke's view that T3 does not equal T1 because he doesn't remember this, right? He doesn't remember at 70 being 5 years old. So he's not the same person according to Locke. And then this is the basic sort of logic behind that. It's a little bit of transitivity. And the third one is called the circularity objection. So there's different types of circularity in philosophy, and sometimes it's vicious. So the claim here is that it's vicious. So 1, people, according to Locke, he defines them as rational, reasoning, conscious. Okay. 2, personal identity equals consciousness. So what makes somebody a person is that they're conscious. But notice, that's circularity. So what makes somebody a person? They're conscious. What makes somebody the same person? They're conscious. That's a circularity. And so the claim here is that this is a vicious circularity, right? If the thing that makes somebody a human being, a person, is the same thing that makes them the same person through time, well, that seems a little strange. We might want to differentiate between that because it's the same logic. If you lose your consciousness, you're no longer a human being, no longer a person. So the thing that makes someone a person, a human, shouldn't be the same thing that makes them a person. It's circular. We're at 16 minutes and I'm told that I shouldn't go over 15. I apologize. But this is the basic thrust of what's going on in Locke.